Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed, a show about the ins and outs of family life. So your life isn't going exactly as planned? Well, you're not alone, and we're here to help out. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in free retirement home search and senior transition support.
And I'm Corrie Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, Tracy Wing's 17-year-old son, Riley, was shot and killed by police this summer in Knowlton. Tracy's still trying to get answers after all this time. Well, we have Tracy in studio with us, Corrie, and that's coming up very, very shortly.
It's I don't even know how to follow up with that, but we're gonna talk about that. But first, we have to talk about. Well, I was sitting at the Siegel Center watching Boom X, which was phenomenal. By the way, it was really, really great. Well worth seeing. You were doing something else, Matt.
At 52 years old, I think I was on the ice playing hockey. Think I still got it. Anyways, long story short, I ruptured my bicep tendon, Corrie, on Monday. And, went through the whole healthcare system, bottom line, surgery tomorrow at 10 a.m. to reattach it. It was funny because 7 hours in the hospital Monday night, got home at 7 in the morning on Tuesday, another 9.5 hours on Wednesday. So there I was cursing our healthcare system. And then my brother called me from Atlanta saying, oh my God, what happened? This was Thursday now. And then we talked about it, and I was saying, geez, it took so long. He says, by the way, you have insurance and stuff like that? Well, I give my Medicare card, right? Yeah. He says, okay, Matt, after surgery here in Atlanta, it's easily $30,000 out of my pocket. So I right there and then shut up and I said, I'll live with the extra time, and I'm in very good hands at the Montreal General and hope all goes well with surgery tomorrow.
I have no doubt, but we need you speedy recovery.
And you were presenting, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I was watching plays, and I was up in Saint Adele presenting at the APPA, which is the Support Services Union of both English Montreal School Board and a number of school boards, and doing some workshops. So I love doing that, and any opportunity to educate and share with other professionals is all right with me. I'm happy to do it.
Support workers in the school system are so crucial. In fact, we're going to be having one or two of them as guests in the next coming months. So
correct.
Stuff. What do we have coming on the second half?
On the second half of the show, let me remind everyone that February 27th is Pink Shirt Day, and that's an initiative created to help raise awareness of those affected by bullying. Well, who better to help us navigate this whole topic than Mona Siegel from DM Family Services. She's going to be in studio with us to discuss how to recognize bullying and what to do about it. That's on the second half of the show.
All right, wonderful. Okay, let's get started. So as I mentioned, in Knowlton this past summer, Tracy Wing's son, Riley Fairholm, was killed as a result of a gunshot. Tracy's in studio with us today to share this story as she continues to search for answers. Tracy, you drove in from Knowlton in this, as you heard from Luciano, this snowstorm, and you're a trooper just for even coming in on a studio on a Sunday. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, Tracy, can you bring us back to July 25th, 2018, this past summer, and provide us with a summary of events?
So on July 25th, I received a text message at around 1:42 a.m., and it was from my son, and it was a text message that said, I love you. And for me and for his dad, when he texts those out of the blue, it's usually he's not feeling right, or, he needs to talk or something. So he was at home, so I went upstairs to check his bedroom, and I saw that he wasn't there. And in the meantime, I texted him back and tried to call to see, where he was. I went back downstairs, and I found a note that he had left for me. And so I got dressed. Well, I was dressed, and I left my house. I thought maybe he'd gone to the beach. And as I was driving towards the beach, I passed a first responder vehicle. And something inside me just made me decide to turn around and to follow it. So when I followed the first responder vehicle, and when I arrived, I actually had time to turn around. So when I arrived, I saw there were police cars, there were lights, and as I got out of my car, I saw because I'm a first responder in the town of Knowlton, and I saw my colleague performing CPR on someone. If you've seen someone do CPR, you know what's happening. So I knew that the person was dead. The police, the SQ, intercepted me and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I think that might be my son." And she said, "Well, what makes you think that?" And I said, "Well, here's the note, And I said, "Can I go?" And she said, "No, we don't know if it's him, and you don't want to see that." And I was like, "Okay." She walked me to my car. We sat in my car, and she proceeded to question me, basically, without ever telling me what had happened. And in the meantime, she said, "Well, maybe you should call his dad." So I called his dad, and he came, and we basically were just seeing this person on the ground. Nobody was really confirming that it was our son, but they weren't confirming that it wasn't him. So, we were assuming it was, and I had assumed that he had thrown himself in front of a vehicle, and Larry had thought maybe he had shot himself. So these are our thoughts in our head. And so, after about 15 minutes, she said, "Well, go to the hospital," because the ambulance had come and had taken Riley to the hospital. So she's like, "Okay, go to the hospital." And I said, "Okay." So I drove my car by myself and got myself to the hospital. And when I arrived, Larry was outside with a SQ officer and a nurse, and there was a lot of yelling going on. And so I arrived. I speak French, whereas Larry doesn't speak English. So for me, living in Quebec is very easy because I can communicate really in either language. It's very easy, and I'm used to that. So I'm used to kind of taking control of conversations. And so that's what I did. And they were like, "Well, he doesn't want to go into this small room." And I was like, "Well, can we go into the reception area?"
Hang on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you, but at this point,
Yeah.
they still haven't have they confirmed that it's your son?
I didn't know that they had confirmed that it was my son, but when Larry had arrived, another police officer had asked him for a picture of Riley, because Larry came in from a different direction, and he was able to see his book bag. So he, we kind of knew it was him, and like nobody was, we just kind of knew, but nobody was really confirming, and we certainly didn't know what the circumstances were.
Right.
And so when we arrived at the hospital, so we just waited in the reception area, and they said, "Well, a doctor's going to come and see you shortly." So we waited there, probably around 15 minutes before anybody came to talk to us. So we were there with our own thoughts, our own assumptions, our own, you speculate. When you don't know what's going on, you have a thousand scenarios that are going through your mind. And mine was always that he'd thrown himself in front of a car, because where he was at the scene, it's like it's like a quiet place of town. It's 1:20 in the morning or 1:45. Because I arrived within 10 minutes and there's no one there. It's an empty restaurant, empty gas station. Like empty means like not even a business there. So I just kind of lost my train of thought there.
No, that's fine.
Well,
It's and I can't possibly imagine. And it's 4:15, and we're going to take a little traffic update, Tracy. But first, when we come back from traffic, all of a sudden, what was potentially a suicide ends up being a so-called suicide by cop, perhaps wrongly labeled. We're going to hear all about your thoughts about the stigma of suicide cop when we come back. But first, Lauren Glazer at the CJAD Traffic Center.
Live Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we have in studio Tracy Wing, whose son was shot and killed by a police officer this past summer in Knowlton. She's still trying to get answers, and the first half of our segment, she explained quite vividly and heartfelt about just arriving at the scene and being taken to the hospital or going to the hospital to try and find out what exactly was going on, and not knowing exactly what had happened. And then we had this discussion, and Matt pointed out right before traffic that it might in fact have been suicide by cop. this was a term I, until we were doing this interview, was not familiar with, and now have become acutely familiar with. So perhaps if you could address that concept of what it is, what you understood, and really how it transpired, if and when, through the hospital, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a little suicide by cop is a term that I'm not very familiar with either, and it's not a term that I necessarily agree with. I'll go back a little bit. While we were at the hospital waiting for the doctor to tell us how he had died, she came and told us, and Larry had left. And then the police officer explained to me that they'd received a 911 call with a man with a gun dressed in black in town in a public area. And when the police arrived, they tried to negotiate with him, and he made a false gesture, and your son died of a police intervention. This was 2 hours after my arrival at this scene. So that was the first time that I had heard that Riley hadn't died by his hand. Mm-hmm. And, if suicide by cop is something that the media likes to use, it's not necessarily a cause of death. Unless a cop knows that that's what the person wants, then, I don't know if that's a good term to use either, because I don't think the cops, that's their job. We just had Mr. Liza last week. He was convicted of manslaughter because he suffocated his wife, and, police officers kill civilians, quite frequently in Quebec, and we don't have any manslaughter charges. We don't have any answers to what happened. We don't even know what happened. It's very secretive. It's very private.
That's Tracy Wing, the mother of Riley Fairholm, in studio with us. And Tracy, I think you're bringing up such an important point. Suicide cop is almost, to an outsider, a cop-out, forgive the pun, but an easy way. There was a note. There was a gun. And this was clearly a suicide by cop, and that's it. They sort of blow it off like that. But and I don't want to put you on the spot because this is all suspected or alleged. Could you estimate from the time when police arrived and when Riley was actually gunned down? Was it 20 minutes? Was there de-escalation? Was there a psychologist involved? How long do you figure this took?
Well, I received the text message at 1:42, and I'm quite positive that I was there within 1:55, 1:58. So it's a max of 10 minutes. Riley was shot. Then they called 911, and I was behind her. So 10 minutes, no one's told me. I've asked the SQ, I've asked the BEI for a timeline. I've even asked them, what time did I arrive? Because I don't remember. I was in shock, and I didn't know the police were involved, so I didn't realize I had to remember.
Yeah, your frame of mind is about Riley, and maybe he's done something to himself. And
yes,
that's
of
the last
course.
thing yeah.
For sure not. And you spoke about the BEI, and I can't even imagine how frustrating it is, or the level of frustration, the challenge of getting answers. What's up with that?
And maybe we should explain, what is BEI?
Mm-hmm. The BEI is a Bureau des Enquêtes Indépendantes. They've been in business since 2016. June. They were put in place to police the police because previously the police were investigating their own actions. So now we have this independent body. And unfortunately, their independence is really not part of their vocabulary. Half of their staff are ex-police officers, and then the other quarter are civilians who used to work in police headquarters, as things like that. So they don't tell you what's going on. And even on their website, what's the best thing about the BEI is that you can go to their website and you can see everything. Mm-hmm. And everything that they have for information is things that they've received from the police officers that were involved. And it did take the SQ 2 hours before they called the BEI to let them know that there was a situation, and that's not how it's supposed to go. And I know the BEI doesn't even investigate what happened after the shooting. They only investigate the shooting. So anything that happened afterwards or before, even those 2 hours before they were notified, they don't look into it. So I'm not sure that the BEI was
And you're still struggling to get answers. You just can't get answers from them. And you've tried and tried. You've gone to the media, and you're still, advocating and still having that frustration.
Yeah. Well, it's an investigation until it gets out of corrections, because the case is closed. It's been since November, and it needs to go to the prosecutor, and then he'll make the decision of whether or not to press charges. But I'm not really looking for that, just looking for the truth. The truth.
Well, Tracy, you're an incredibly strong and courageous and inspirational person. Thank you for coming here and advocating and fighting for Riley. We know, Mom Tracy Wing. There's Dad Larry Fairholm. You've got 2 sisters, Reagan and Maggie. I could tell you, just based, Corrie, on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook post, hundreds of shares and thousands of people that are behind you and supporting you. So if there's, I can't possibly have words to console you, but know that there's a whole community supporting you and behind you, and wish you continued strength. You mentioned that there's a vigil coming up on March 6th, not for your son, but for someone else.
Yes. Well, I wanted to mention a few people, but I'll start with Corrie Select. It'll be March 6, 2017 was when he died in custody of the police. There'll be a vigil in Pierrefonds in front of the police station on March 6th. So I'd welcome there. There's Noah Cohen that has died by the police, Nicholas Gibbs in August of last summer. These are names that we need to remember, because the only thing that they have in common is that they died by the hands of the police, and we can't forget them. And it's in the public interest, because it could easily be your child. Very easily could be your child.
Thank you, Tracy. You are incredible. Your strength is a role model to all of us, really overwhelming. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming in. Coming up after the news, we are going to recognize bullying. How do you recognize it? How do you define it? And what do you do about it? That's coming up after the 4:30 news.